Hello, everybody, and I am super excited for today. I want to introduce you to my new friend, Jasmine Paul. Jasmine is the founder of CreateFinStew, which is a fintech startup that is transforming the finances of everyday people, and she's doing it creatively. And
Yes.
after purchasing her first house at the age of just 23, and then paying almost $40,000 in student loan debt by the age of 24, and then shortly thereafter buying her first rental property, she realized that she has a niche for creative financial wellness. And so since 2014, Jasmine has served 38 clients and helped them to eliminate over $188,000 in debt. Ah, this is so cool. Like, I read this and I'm like so excited about it. And not only that, people, but now she has the goal of transforming 10,000 wallets, and by doing it one heart, one mind, and $1 at a time. I love
Yes.
that. Jasmine, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie. So excited to be in your community. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we connected.
Yeah. Okay, so I know that you sent me this intro, and I want to unpack it because I know that there's people out here that are listening to this and they're like, "Oh my gosh, she's done all this by like the age of like what? You probably did all this by like the age of 25." And they're like, "I've
Yeah.
barely done half of this and I'm like 40." So not to say that that's wrong.
Not to
There's
compare,
anyone out
not at
there,
all.
everyone's different, but I
Yeah.
this is so cool. So let's just start from the beginning and talk about, so the first part of that was you bought your first house by the age of 23. So
Correct.
let's step back. Why did you do this? I know that there's tons of 23-year-olds that are actually probably listening to this. I know that there are. And so
Right.
they're thinking, how did you do that? Why did you do that? I'm not even thinking about buying a house. So let's start
Absolutely.
there.
So, I guess to know the entire journey. So I was in college, like many people, and I remember there was a friend of mine. He purchased a property right across the street from the school. I wasn't going to, but it was like a neighboring school, and I was like, "Wait, you purchased a property? How?" Like, so he
Yeah.
purchased this property, like it was under 20K, and it wasn't like this nice property at all. It was just a house, needed a lot of work,
Yeah.
but he was renting out the rooms to his fraternity brothers. And I was like,
Mm.
oh my gosh. So he's like making money, in college. And I said, well, when I graduate, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And so graduated, got my first job, moved out west, and I started saving like really aggressively because the goal was to buy this property, and I was going to do just like my friend. I was going to have roommates and they were going to help me pay my mortgage. And so had no idea about like owning a property or owning a house, like just that was just the goal, like
Yeah.
own the home. And so I moved to California, was living with roommates, and so I was able to save about 60% of my paycheck every month. And so
Wow.
that money was going towards my savings. And then I moved to another state and was actually struggling to find a property. Ended up living in an apartment for about a year. Just trying to find a place. I think we went and saw like 30 places.
Oh.
It was awful. And that was, when I told you off camera about, switching the realtor and
Yeah.
finding a better team and really praying over the property. And so, yeah, so I was literally like, I want to say a month out of my lease coming up. And I told my then landlord, like, hey, I'm in the process of finding a home, but I haven't found one yet. But I don't want to renew the lease because I believe that I'm going to find a place. He was like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, no problem. But just let you know, your lease is coming up.
Oh.
So I was like, oh, okay, God. All right. Well, what are we going to do? And I found this amazing property, so beautiful, and just started praying really hard. I had my pastor come with me to help me like walk through the property, walk through the home inspection, and it was a blessing. My realtor and my pastor and I would pray in the
Wow.
house. We prayed over it like 3 times, and I had so much peace about it, and I was like, okay, let's do it.
I think that's so cool that you got your pastor involved. Are you guys like, do you have a really close relationship then in like all areas of
Yes.
life?
Absolutely. So I don't live in that state anymore. We both have moved like
Mm-hmm.
across the country.
Wow.
Um, but yes, absolutely. We were very close. So at the time I was, I guess, what someone would consider like an assistant to the pastor. Um,
Oh, cool.
yeah. So that was like my role in the church.
I love that. And I love that you
Yeah,
got them involved and praying over the whole process.
absolutely.
That's so cool that you've incorporated prayer into that.
Yes, you
So,
have to.
yeah, definitely. So, okay, so then you bought this property. So, so then the next thing you did by the age of 24 was to pay off all these student loans that you had, almost
Yes.
$40,000. That's a lot.
Yes.
And so,
Absolutely.
did you start like paying that off as you were buying the property, or did you kind of start that after you actually purchased the property?
It was before. So I started, so remember I had that kind of nest egg of the 60% of savings or 60% of
Yeah.
my paycheck. And so I was going through Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University,
Yes.
which is awesome. I recommend it. And I kind of took the money that I had saved while living with the roommates
Mm.
and started paying it down really aggressively while I was in the process of buying the house. So my lender was like, okay, you need to chill because we need to get the mortgage approved. So I did have to take a break once I got pre-approved. And, you know, like, I get it. She was like, you
Yeah.
know, I understand what you're trying to do, but we need to make sure that, you know,
Mm.
things aren't just changing drastically. So I stopped, I put it on pause while I was going through, you know, underwriting and trying to make sure I got to the closing. And so, but after closing, I got the keys. I was aggressively paying it down because, you know, there's like that 30-day window where you don't have to pay a mortgage. And so
Yeah.
I was just like, just paying it down as
Yeah.
I,
Yeah, that's awesome. So,
yeah.
was your motivation for paying off the student loans from the Dave Ramsey course then?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, okay, so part of it. So I remember when I graduated, I called my student loan service provider
Mm-hmm.
to figure out what the payment plan was going to look like, how long it was going to take me to pay it off. And they gave me this crazy date. And I was like, how did something that only took me about 4 years
Yeah.
to accrue take, you know, almost double
Yeah.
time to pay back? It doesn't make any sense. And then it was also like they gave me this interest amount of how much interest I was
Mm-hmm.
going to pay over time. And I was like, what? No. So it was like a mixture of like, okay, challenge accepted, as well as Dave Ramsey, like, hey, get out of debt, you know, live financially free. And I noticed, I realized, you know, I was just kind of like paying the minimum payment just to kind of pay it and not really thinking about there's an end in sight. You can do this quickly and then be able to use your money for other things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I like that you educated yourself on your interest on the student loans,
Yes.
because I think if people saw, like, even with like car payments or any kind of loan that has like these high interest rates, if you actually did the
Yes.
math and saw how much your actual loan is, so your principal versus like how much you're actually going to be paying in interest, like especially for
Yes.
like car payments where you have like these massive interest rates, and then you wonder why people are like buying these things, because you're like, do you know that you're like paying twice for this car basically?
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, so that's awesome. So like you saw that and you're like, no, like we're not
Yeah,
having any of this. That's
absolutely.
cool. So okay, so after then you paid off your student loans, did you have that same mindset towards your mortgage then?
I did initially.
Mm-hmm.
I did initially because I was like, oh, I can pay this off and in a short amount of time. But then I shifted my goals because I wanted another property. And so I was like, well, I don't know if this is going to be long term. I might not keep this property long term. And so I stopped paying it down
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, I don't think this is going to be for the next 5 to 10 years. And it actually, I owned that property for about 5.5 years. And so I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I was able to put that money towards another investment.
Yeah.
For this other property that I have, I'm also not paying it down, just because I really want to keep my cash reserves high, so I can go and buy other properties.
Yeah. So, okay. So that first property you bought, you sold it like 5.5 years later.
Yep.
So when did I know that you bought your very first rental property. When did that come in?
In 2016.
Okay. So how many years after that was?
That was 3 years after the first one.
Okay. So you owned both of them at the same time.
Correct. Yep.
And then where did you move after you sold the first house that you lived in?
I was actually, was that 2018? Yeah, I moved to South Korea. I was living in South Korea at the time. Yeah. So I remember that summer, because I remember it, my tenants left, and I was like, okay, I can either rent it out again, or I can just sell it and move on. And I felt like I was in the space. God was just saying, okay, maybe this is not where you need to be. I had some issues with property management and good tenants, but it was just, I wasn't able to go to the property. I wasn't able to see it. And I didn't really have that team there. I was like calling property managers around the town, and nobody was really like, I'm really big on like that initial first impression. And so if you're not picking up my phone calls now, then you're probably not going to pick up my phone calls or my tenants' phone calls in the future when there's an emergency. And so I was like really praying about letting that one go. And it was hard for me. That was the first one. It was doing really well. But it was time for it to let go. And I was moving that summer overseas, and the end of the summer. And so I was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? And when I tell you God made a way, like he just made that transaction so smooth. I found a realtor. She was bomb. Like she came in, she like repotted the plants that were outside. She like cleaned the place up. She even brought like a dog in to like do a video of a virtual tour. Like it was such a smooth transaction. We went on the market and closed so the whole time was 47 days from the time the house went on the market to the time we closed with the buyers. 47 days total. So I mean, it was just like such a smooth transaction. I was grateful.
Awesome. People are going to be reaching out to you right now, to ask for the number of that agent that you use, because they're like, my agent was so bad. How can I get a person like that?
She was awesome. And I never went to the property. I did everything virtually. I signed, with the closing documents, I signed with a notary, a public notary who met me, a mobile notary, I guess that's what they're called. And it was amazing. I mean, she was very communicative, always communicating. I was like, hey, any updates, anybody coming? Like she was doing the open houses, literally did not go to the property at all that whole time. And I got my check after it sold, because it did really well.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let's kind of like go back to the beginning of your like financial story. Yeah. So you're obviously very well versed in, looking at your finances and expenses and things like that creatively. I mean, this is amazing. So were you taught these kind of money principles growing up, or at what point did you kind of learn like how to look at your money creatively like this?
Yeah, no. So my dad, I feel like did a really good job of not necessarily giving me all the principles, but he always gave me like this Visa Bucks card. So back in the day, Visa had like this prepaid card for teenagers. Yeah. And so he would put an allowance on it. And so I felt like I learned from that card, what you have is what you have. And if you try to overspend, it's going to reject, it's going to decline, because you don't have any money anymore. And so I learned from that, I guess, from that aspect. But as far as like formal education, I don't think I really received a lot of, I guess, financial literacy until I got to college, and just not having money. Like it wasn't necessarily like education. It was just like, you're broke, so you don't have any money. And I honestly didn't learn about financial education until I graduated and really started making money, started having a salary. And I was like, oh, wow. So I'm getting all this money in my paycheck. But if I don't, tell it where to go, if I'm not a good steward over it, then it's just going to deplete. And then I won't have anything to show for it.
Yeah. So did you use a budget, or I guess a budget? I don't know. A lot of people are weird about that word, but
Right?
I think cool.
It's a budget. Yes, absolutely. I still, to this day, I have a budget. At the end of the month, like tomorrow, I have on my calendar to go over my finances for May and for June, especially now with like COVID-19, things are shifting. My going out fund is no longer there anymore. It's like going towards groceries because I keep eating so much during this time.
So true.
So yes, I had a budget. Absolutely. I had like my housing, my groceries, car insurance. I was really grateful. So I think I don't share this too often, but my parents, for my first car out of high school, like my parents bought cash. And in my second car, college, I didn't get a car my first year. My mom didn't really trust the 98 Honda Civic to travel so far. So I got another car, which was a 2002 Honda Civic, and it was paid off in cash as well. So that was something, that helped me. I didn't have a car note, in college or in graduating college. And so that was something, having stuff paid off so that I could focus on, the debt, the student loan debt was really helpful.
Yeah. So I know that you mentioned that you just didn't have money. So
yeah,
how did you get by? Obviously you had to get creative there.
Straight up the Lord. So it's interesting because, I look back at my time in college and like, although I was broke, like I was working 3 jobs,
Wow.
and going to school full time. My first 2 years, I was running track and then joined a sorority my sophomore year and just doing all kinds of, like, there was a lot going on. I don't know how I had that much energy, but I also like was not a good steward of my money at all. Like I would get a paycheck and then be on this website for shoes and spending like $100 in shoes. Like literally like one pair of shoes was like over $100. It was just like, what is wrong with you? Or I would like go out, like that was before I was saved. And so I was going out and like eating out and doing all these like fun young adult things. So my money was just going everywhere but a savings.
Okay, so I want to pause. So you mentioned that it was before you got saved. So I would love to hear, so do you feel like that when you accepted Jesus, do you feel like that changed the way that you viewed your finances?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, yes. So I feel like my whole journey is very interesting. So I'll give like a very short,
That's why you're here.
Very short piece. So I walked away from the church probably like high school age. I just wasn't interested in going. And my mom was kind of like, okay, you don't want to go, cool. Like, so I worked. And I remember I was just like, I don't know if I was like angry at God or just not interested in God. I don't know which one it was, but I remember like, I'm just not really interested in the whole church thing. And so when I decided to go to the college that I went to, I remember going for my where you pick your courses like with your advisor. And so we would go in and sit with our advisor, figure out our major and walk through the different courses. And so he's like, you also have to select what time you would like to go to chapel. And I was like, what are you talking about? Chapel? Like, why do I have to go to chapel? And he was like, you didn't know that you went to a Methodist school. Like, we have chapel. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I never signed up for that. Like, so he's like showing me at the back of the car, like our brochure for the college. And like, yes, this is a Methodist community. Every freshman has to go to chapel. And I was like, well, I'll be darned. So I ended up going to chapel, and it was really the first time hearing the word of God in such a relatable way. I felt like the preacher was always speaking to me every single time, and it was just so encouraging. And so was still, you know, in the world and doing worldly things. And my senior year, actually started going to a Baptist church, like faithfully. So every Sunday I was going and just loved the word. And I would always get convicted on walking down the aisle. Like I wanted to give my life to Christ, because every Sunday he'd be like, if there's one, you know, that call to salvation.
Yes.
And I was so scared. I was like, I am not perfect. I'm not cleaned up. There's no way I can walk down this aisle. Like maybe next Sunday, maybe next Sunday. Kept putting it off, putting it off. And then finally I left. So I graduated, had to move before my first job was, I guess, available for me to attend. I moved back home, and I was like, okay, I am determined to get this relationship right with God. The next time I go to, or the next place I go to, I want to have like a really good relationship with him. So I moved out to California, started going to this church, and I mean, I was going to Bible study, I was going to Sunday school, you know, church service, and it was amazing. Such a great space to grow, but it was also a temporary duty. I knew that I wasn't going to be there for long. And so, but it was a like really good foundation for me. And I actually had this friend that every Sunday we would kind of like debrief our church sessions.
Yeah.
And so, our church services. And so we would meet for coffee at Starbucks and just talk about, you know, what we learned and how we're going to apply it to our lives. And that was like so pivotal for me in that moment as a young believer, just to be able to talk about Christ and talk about what I learned and how I'm actually going to apply it to my life. And then when I made the second move, that's when, I want to say about 2 months after I got there, I gave my life to Christ.
Wow.
And it was powerful. Like, it was just such a beautiful thing. Like, I didn't know I was like missing this world, like this amazing community of believers who loved you and cared about you, and that I received grace and mercy every single day, and new revelations. And it was just such a beautiful experience. And then, you know, speaking of the finances, just being able to trust God in my finances, that was something that I really struggled with in those college years. I remember, just because of my initial thought of the church, I thought that, you know, tithing and giving was just for, you know, the pastor to have a Mercedes or something. Like, I literally thought that's what it was. I'm not lying. I'm not lying, Katie. I always share this. Like, I always thought, but, you know, going to this church and just understanding ministry and understanding that the church has to function, like not just the church, the body of Christ, but like the church building has to function. So it has to pay utilities and water and insurance and taxes and just all these different things that you don't think about. And that your giving is going to that, but also ministry is expensive. Like, it's not cheap, you know, to feed the hungry. Like, you have to buy food to feed the hungry, you know? And so I didn't know. And so it helped me in my giving for sure. Like, I put my faith all the way in God, but I had to go back to that budget, because that's my first line item is tithes, like 10% I give. And, you know, then I move on after that. But that was absolutely, my faith definitely shaped my finances.
That's really cool. I thank you so much for sharing your testimony. I mean, it's so powerful to hear how Christ transforms people, not just in their life, like, you know, the salvation and things, but simply like he changed the way that you look at your money. And I think that that's so cool, because our faith really does impact every area of life, including our finances and including the way that you look at your real estate. And even just simply like how we're going about our daily lives and doing the chores around our house. And so I know, so you have a rental property still right now. So how do you implement your faith into kind of being that landlord then?
Absolutely. So, so I actually was a property manager of the property last year. I switched to giving that to somebody who is more knowledgeable than I am, because that is just way too much. I'm so grateful for him. Thank God. But I definitely, like you said, I believe in your blog post about praying over your tenants, especially
Yeah.
during this time, just keeping them lifted up in prayer,
Yeah.
just really praying over the house and the household and making sure that there's peace in that house and that there's no strife and there's no issues, because I think that's so important, what you're walking into. Um, I know when I was looking for properties, that was something that was really important. Like, I want to make sure there's nothing in here that is crazy. Like, we need to pray for this. And if it's not right, then we need to leave. And so I think it's so important of keeping our tenants lifted up in prayer. But also that relationship with the property manager, just having that just healthy
Yeah.
communication, and not trying to take advantage and not trying to um be not like Christ. Like,
Hmm.
he's called us to love one another. We have to love each other. And so in business, that's so important to love but also be professional. And I'm really grateful for what God is doing in this season. Something that I've implemented in my last property before I sold it was I would always have like a routine, like cleaning and maintenance of the appliances, of
Yeah.
the hot water heater, the AC unit, because that's important. Like, making sure these are operational, but also, like, they need to have heat, they need to have
Yeah.
cool air. And so you need to do your part as an investor, as a landlord, to take care of the people that are in your tenant or in your household, or in your property. And so just being the landlord that I wanted when I was in college, because I remember having like two experiences. I had one who was like slumlord, like terrible. The place was falling apart. It was awful. And then I had one who was amazing. She would always like just be on it. If there was something that wasn't working, she was replacing it. Like, there was never an issue. And so I always want to be that person, like being aggressive and taking care of the people, because I feel like if you take care of the people, they'll take care of you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I really love how you said that. Be the landlord that I wanted in college. Like, that has to be like posted somewhere, like for all real estate investors. Like, if you own a rental property, like that should be your slogan, like being
Yeah.
the landlord that I wish I had in college, like,
Yes.
and it's kind of going back to that, like, treat others how you want to be treated and stuff. So
Yes.
I mean, if you would want to live in this rental property, how would you want your landlord to be treating you? Do you want them to
Right.
ignore you when you have a maintenance issue, or do you
Mm,
want them to be there listening and trying to figure it out with you? So that's
right.
awesome. I love that. I'm
Yeah.
probably going to use that at some point, but
I
I'll make
love
sure to give
it.
you credit.
No, it's all good. One of my other friends, he owns mobile homes. He owns a slew of them, like a whole, like,
Yeah.
just slew of mobile homes. And he gives his tenants like cards, like Christmas cards, and then he gives them like
Aw,
a little gift card in it as well for like their birthday. And I was like, oh, that's good. I like that.
like
So
that. That's really
yeah,
intentional. That's so cute.
exactly. And so I thought that was really cool. There was one thing that I did for my previous tenants. There was like an issue. I don't know what happened, but there was some type of issue with the maintenance guy, or where he didn't show up on time or whatever. And so
Mm,
I offered like a free mowing lawn service. And so they were able to use that service when they were moving out. So because they were packing
yeah.
up the lawnmower and stuff. So that was just something that I was like, hey, like, I know that it wasn't a good experience. So I apologize. And so they were really grateful for it.
That's really cool. I like the like creative acts of love and kindness. So
Yeah,
that's really cool. So
absolutely.
I kind of want to spin back around and talk a little bit more about what you're doing now. So we kind of talked a lot about like your financial background and stuff, but
Yeah.
so you have helped so many people, 38 people, to conquer $188,000 of debt.
Yes,
So let's talk
absolutely.
about how you're doing that and what you're doing to help these people to do that.
Absolutely. So I founded CreateFinStew from a conversation. It was a friend looking to get out of debt. And so
Mm.
I kind of helped her with my strategy of getting out of debt and creating more opportunities for financial freedom. And so from that conversation, there was another conversation until like people just kept calling and asking about like financial advice. And I'm like, hey guys, like I'm not a financial planner by any means. I can coach you through this, but I am not that, like, I don't have those certifications. And so people kept coming, which was awesome. And I had and that others had. And we just started sharing.
That's so cool. I love that. I think that that's so true to who God has made us. You know, he's given us so many gifts and talents that when you start to utilize those, people start to notice, and you bring so much glory and honor to God by continuing to use those and exercise those talents that you have. And then ultimately, I mean, you're doing this so that people are getting out of debt. That's such a good thing that like God honestly is probably looking down and he's like, way to go.
I pray so. I really do. I'm really grateful in just the people that I've been able to come across, even people that aren't necessarily clients. I try to implement Jesus and finances in all my conversations, because that's the mission that I feel like God has led me to talk about. So I love, always talking about Jesus, but also let's talk about money. And people get uncomfortable. And that's okay. It's supposed to be uncomfortable, but I always feel led to just share something new, even if that person decides not to work with me.
Yeah. The Bible talks about money so many times that you're like, okay, God obviously cares about how we handle our finances and what we're doing, and makes it very clear that if we have debt, we are slaves. And so conquering that debt to become not a slave of money, but a slave of God, like that is just such a cool thing. And so I thank you for doing this work for others. So practical tips, if someone is, now listening to this and they're like, okay, I am that person who has tons of debt. I am now wanting to kind of make that next step to get out of debt. What would you say should be their first step in that direction?
So we talked about this earlier. It's definitely praying. So praying over your finances, praying over provision, praying over a release of this debt, because I think some people want to get out of debt, but they're kind of like stuck in the burden of having debt. And so they just automatically assume like, I'm just going to be in debt for the rest of my life. And I hear people speak that over their life. Like, oh, I'm just going to be in debt for the rest of my life. No, we cancel that in the name of Jesus. And we're going to speak life and abundance into our financial spaces. It says in the word that we are to be the lender and not the borrower. And so we need to be speaking God's principles of our finances in our own situation. So the first thing would definitely be praying and giving God our finances, but also taking a really hard look at your expenses. So I always look at my income and then my expenses. What am I spending my money on? And so sometimes people have budgets, but they're not sticking to those budgets. And so if you're pulling your debit card or your credit card, highlighting, so I use like 5 to 6 different colors of highlighters. And I I print out my transaction report. So I don't just use my phone. I personally see it. And cause I feel like you seeing it is like, oh shoot.
It's emotional. It gets emotional. You're like, whoa.
Like, why did I spend all this money at Target? And what did I buy?
What was it? Where's the fruit of that shopping trip?
Exactly. And so each month when I do my budget meeting with myself, I write out all the different expenses. So not just, so I highlight, but I also write everything out just so I can see, oh, you spent how much on food or how much on going out? Maybe we need to adjust that some way. Or maybe this is going out because you were traveling during this time and this is why you ate out versus, spending money on groceries or different things. And so I write it out because yes, there's an emotional tie to when you're seeing your money just going out of your paycheck. And then if you go to the bottom, you get to the end and your expenses are more than your income, you have a problem.
Definitely. Yeah. Yes. So if someone wanted to contact you for some financial coaching, how could they get in contact with you?
Absolutely. They can head over to my website, www.createfinstew.com. That's CreateFinstew.com. Or you can check me out on Instagram at Jasmine like Paul.
Very cool. And then just to wrap up, I know that you wrote a book.
Yes.
I would love to close out just by talking about it. I know it's not completely about finances, but I think
Yes.
that it's a great book that everyone can learn a lot from. So why don't
I
you tell
love
us a
it.
little bit more about it, and then I'll make sure to link to it.
Okay. Yes. So Set Your Truth Free, a 20-something's Guide to Living a Truthful Life was something that I wrote when I was in college and graduating from college. I felt like there weren't any resources that talked about faith and talked about just the different things that are going on in college and what happens after college with adulting. And so
Yeah.
I felt like this was a great resource for young people. I do include a portion of the book about finances and kind of my financial debt journey and being financially free and
Mhm.
the things that I actually did in college to help me towards my financially free journey.
Cool. That's so awesome.
Yes.
I love that. I think that's so true. We need so much more help in college because we just don't get it. And so I'm
We
glad
don't
that
know.
somebody wrote a book.
And there are plenty of other authors out there. Like now, I feel like there are just so many things, so many different people, writing about young people and writing for
Yeah.
young people because we need that authenticity. We need intentionality. Like we need
Mhm.
people that know the gospel and are going to give us the gospel. And so, yeah, there are tons of authors, but it'd be really cool if you buy my book too.
Great. Well, I'll make sure to link to it so people can check it out. And
Yeah,
yeah, so thank you so much, Jasmine, for being with us today. And I pray that,
absolutely.
people have gotten a lot of wisdom from your life experiences and the things that you have gone through. So
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you
Thank you
so
so much,
much.
Katie. All right.
Take care.